Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. Retired soldiers of Reddit. What's something you saw or experienced that you never shared with anyone? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My very first patient in Afghanistan was a 10-month-old girl. The father brought her to our gate asking for help. We checked her out, and she is literally missing all of the skin from her shoulder blade to waist on the left backside, burned to the bone. Dad tells Terp that she tripped and got cut by gravel. Clearly she's burned. I can still smell it today. I can remember the screech she made, the charred skin I had to remove, and that asshole just sat in the corner. There's nothing I could do to right the situation other than do what I can for her. That single moment definitely set the tempo for the following 9 months. One of my best friends got drunk and fell off the barracks. They labeled it an accident. It was actually suicide over a girl. I know, not too interesting, but I thought I'd share. Never told anyone. Always felt guilty. Not a retired soldier, but a naval hospital corpsman with a Marine unit who deployed to Sangif Valley, Afghanistan in 2012. I've seen a lot of casualties in my short time in the Navy, but no amount of love tissue training could prepare me for the first no-shit trauma patient. It wasn't even one of my Marines who got hit. I was chilling at the battalion aid station with a group of other corpsmen, getting our shit together and talking about who would survive a zombie apocalypse when we got a call that we had a patient coming in. This was about a week into the deployment. We had just gotten to the FOB, and the majority of us were pushing out to patrol bases for the next few days. I was one of the most senior corpsmen there, HM3E4, so I was in charge of leading them into treating the patient. We had a PA there, but he was more interested in sleeping and trusted our medical knowledge to be able to treat this patient properly. When the Vic came in, I ran outside to get a good look at the patient before he came in, and I was not expecting what I saw. He was an older gentleman, probably around 70, hard to tell, and he had stepped on an IED and had bilateral above-the-knee amputations. Tourniquets had been applied, and the bleeding had been controlled by the time he got to the PAS. My team attached monitors, applied secondary tourniquets, and got IV access while I secured the airway. After what seemed like seconds, we had finished our first and second assessment, and we were waiting in the bird while the ProPac stopped reading any vitals. I remember looking down at the man and seeing that there wasn't any life in his eyes. We attempted CPR for a few cycles, but without blood products, it was useless. I called it. We were removing all of the interventions we had done when we rolled him over, and I noticed a small incision below his buttocks, and above where the tourniquet was applied, there was a small slice where some shrapnel had flown up and severed his femoral. This was the team I was supposed to lead, and I killed this patient because I couldn't get level-headed enough to remember the simple things I learned at CTM and TCCC. I've had many trauma experiences since that day, but this one sticks with me the most. I've stumbled upon shacks full of dead and dying people, and had friends get shot and blown up, but my first casualty haunts me every night. I've since used this particular patient as a learning mechanism now that I am a seasoned instructor of TCCC, so that hopefully my students don't make the same mistake. I'm on mobile, so sorry for the formatting, but this is going to get buried anyway. Also, I get out in 12 days, super stoked. TL, DR. I killed my first trauma patient in the country, and I was kind of a bitch about it. We live and learn. Alright, now you're doing great things, so, sometimes in the heat of the moment, things happen, so glad you learned from it, and congrats on getting out. I served in the military here in Finland, as required by law, and there was this guy who chain smoked a lot, and we called him Skorksten, Swedish for chimney. His father had killed his mom and then hung himself while Skorksten was young. Skorksten was always depressed, but he got along, and we were good friends. Then, 5 years after we get out, I got a message from an army friend who said that Skorksten had hung himself because his girlfriend had left him for another guy. I've accepted that there was nothing I could have done, but it still haunts me. Sometimes when I go out for a smoke, I still remember how he would ask me for a cigarette because he had misplaced his own. So I light a cigarette for him and place it on the side of the ashtray. That's my way of remembering him. The feeling of not feeling anything after killing someone is crazy. It's not like you're stone cold, there's no emotion, but think of it as if you're a waiter at a restaurant and you serve your customers. You don't think anything of it when it's happening, you just do it and carry on. It doesn't hit you until later and you're like, motherfucker, I just did that. The emotion of everything is so bland when it happens, but so raw when you take a step back. Whenever you have a buddy that gets killed, yeah, it's scary, but it doesn't hit you until later. Every moment in that person's life led up to that moment. It's concluded, over, and done. Every first kiss, every Friday night football game, every person they'd ever had any contact with or relationship with, everything they'd ever said, every plan they ever had, or every memory they'd ever created to have a conclusion in a single moment that ended their entire existence. TL, DR, life is precious. Don't take it for granted. I took part in 78 separate attacks by hostile forces around Mosul in 2005. Lots of bad shit, but the one thing I need sheer is one time I was in the turret of an M114 Humvee behind an M250 machine gun doing convoy security, and I looked in a vehicle as we cruised by, and there was a little girl, probably 8, who had healed up gunshot wounds to the face. She was missing an eye. She was smiling broadly at me and waving at me emphatically. I just waved back. That little girl had the weight of the world on her shoulders and was smiling. I've never had a bad day since. There was also a kid whose thumb was barely hanging onto his hand. I was in the turret again that day and the kid ran alongside the truck, making a rapping motion with his hand. I tried to get my first aid pouch open so I could throw him my sterile bandage to wrap up his hand, but the old button, a Vietnam-era piece of shit, wouldn't come unsnapped. The little dude ran next to us for about a minute while I effed with it. Finally, I just slipped on my Alice clips, tugged them off my vest, and tossed the whole thing to him. He was smiling the whole time, too, and was very happy for the packet. It's like, F, man, we really effed shit up over there. Why couldn't we have done more really good stuff, instead of escorting the commander douchebag and the whole fucking PR team to his school, just so they could get some effing photo ops with the poor kids to put them in the newspaper back home. As an infantryman, I had plenty of bad experiences in Afghanistan. Plenty I've told people. However, I had some very unique and beautiful experiences I've never told anyone this story. My platoon was probably a month and a half into a 1-year-long deployment. The area we were responsible for patrolling was remote and poor, even by Afghan standards. It would take us probably 2 hours by vehicle to get to our area of operations, the district we were responsible for patrolling. That was just getting to it, not including the farthest villages in the district we were responsible for patrolling. Since it would take us so long to get there, we would drive there, set up shop in the abandoned school for 2 to 3 days, and run patrols out of there. One day, we returned from our regular day patrol. We had a couple hours of downtime before we set out for our night patrol. It was late afternoon or early evening, and I was sitting outside under the Afghan sun with my body armor on but no helmet, just taking in the scenery, looking out over the countryside. I saw these 3 girls, probably around 10 to 12 years of age, frolicking in a field, but just being young girls. I remember they were dressed in brightly colored dresses and hijabs, one purple and one red. I can't remember the other. They were maybe 150 to 250 meters away. The scene of them playing in this farm field with mountains in the background was a very idyllic setting, so I decided to try and take a photo of them. I had a small case on my body armor with a camera in it. I reached down to take it out and take a photo, but they scurried away. A minute or so later, they returned, so I tried again. They scurried away. This repeats itself several more times. I remember thinking, damn it, stay still for a second so I could take a photo. Then I realized they were watching me. They knew I was going for my camera, and they would scurry away when I went for it. This was before I realized certain cultures had aversions to having their photos taken, let alone without their permission. It turned into a game. I would quickly touch my camera case, and they would scurry away, then come back giggling, repeat. Then they started playing a Simon Says game with me. They would make little motions with their hands, do the raccoon eyes and whatnot. I would mimic them, and then they would look at each other giggling. Eventually it got dark and they had to leave. I think about those little girls often. It helped me realize the beauty of that country. Despite all the destruction and death, this was their home. This is where their lives would take place. What has become of their lives? I hope that they can find some semblance of peace in their lives. Well, hopefully they had just a normal, happy, and still living a good life. I know the area isn't the best, but there are good people in this world. The thing that will stick with me forever is this. Back in 2010, northwest of Sangin, Afghanistan, I was the corpsman for my group of 4 Marines. We specialized in JTACs, guys who call in aircraft, and were supporting the Georgian army in creating a new patrol base. We get to the area where the base is going to be built, Sandwalls FD World, and camp out in the trucks until the bulldozers finish building the walls and filling up the HESCO barriers. On the second day, near noon, we hear an explosion and see in the distance a large smoke cloud. We radioed to see if there were any friendly forces near the area, but no coalition forces were near us. We then mount up and go check it out, and as we near the site, we see 2 adult figures running around a van that hit an IED. As we pull up, there is a 6-passenger Afghan van that looks like it hit an IED. This van was destroyed, charred, and the engine was on fire. As we dismounted, the 2 adults ran to us. This freaked us out because they might be insurgents, but our interpreter was there and told us that they were brothers asking for help because one of the brothers had 4 daughters in the van with them, and they hit the IED. We rushed to the van, and there's still smoke everywhere, but we start pulling on the rear driver's door, and I can hear one of the daughters still screaming inside. As we pry the door open, we look inside, and I will never forget what I saw. Inside was all charred. Smoke was still coming out of the van, and in the seats were what remained of the 4 daughters. 3 of the daughters were torn apart by the explosion, with limbs and body parts everywhere. The 4th was still holding one of her sister's amputated hands, while her other hand was pressed against her side. The blast had amputated her lower left leg, going up to her pelvis. She was trying to scream, but she was already losing too much blood, making her lose consciousness. We pulled her out, and I got to work trying to stop her from bleeding out, but I only could keep her alive for 15 more minutes. The father and uncle held her hand as she never woke up after losing consciousness. Me and my Marines started collecting the body parts of the other daughters so the father and brother could bury their remains. Their ages were 4, 4, 5, and 6. Afghanistan. There was a dead Iraqi guy on the ground, half covered with a blanket after we shot him. I saw a pack of cigarettes in his shirt pocket, and I remember reaching in there and taking them so I could hand them out to the guys. I even gave some to the other Iraqi prisoners we were watching at the time. It was one of the weird moments thinking about it. How strange would it be if your dead body was laying there and some guy came out and took your pack of cigarettes out of your shirt pocket? That morning, like most mornings, you put your cigarettes in your jacket and went out to face the day. You die, and then some guy from another country casually takes them from you as you rot in the sun. Weird. I served with 2 paras in the British Army. I joined up in 2009 and only recently got out on a medical discharge. A mortar round destroyed a lot of nerves in my back. I still have 100% mobility, but I can't feel my lower middle back, so I can't be a paratrooper anymore. I've been out for a while now, and so many people ask me ridiculously stupid questions on a subject they know absolutely nothing about, which I couldn't explain if I tried. Things like, did you kill anyone? And did you drive any tanks? And other stupid shit like that gets right on my nerves. Ironic. I do have one fairly traumatic story though. My platoon was out on patrol, and we were coming across this irrigated field in a loose staggered formation, so we were pretty spread out. If an IED goes off, there are minimal casualties, so we're walking on this field, and then someone from a well-concealed position opens fire on us, followed by a few more, and we all take cover. The Taliban had chosen a terrible place for an ambush. It may be an open field with trees on all sides, but irrigation ditches make great cover. So I set my GPMG up and returned fire with everyone else. Now, this is the only engagement I've fought that could be described as close up. All the others were at least 800 yards, but this one, while not exactly dangerously close, if we were to call in CAS, was still a lot more personal than I'd like. I'd probably estimate the whole fight took place within 50 to 100 yards, so I'm firing. I'd probably go through about 600 rounds, which is a lot for this type of engagement. That's all the ammo I carry, plus a 200-round belt carried by another guy. Anyone who hasn't seen combat probably thinks it's how it is in the movies, all that tactical shit and everyone is cool as a snowman's bollocks. It's not like that. When you're in a close proximity firefight, everyone pretty much loses their heads. Guys will shout the most ridiculous things and fire off all their ammo as fast as they possibly can. I still haven't gotten to the horrible bit. I've been writing this for almost half an hour now, and I'm putting it off. We were starting to get the upper hand now, and that's when I saw this young Afghan lad on the edges of the trees, firing his AK from the hip, not in cover. He had no idea what he was doing. He couldn't have been older than 16, and I didn't even hesitate. That's what scares me. I wheeled my GPMG around and fired 2 bursts at him, and he just came apart, just like that, like red mist. I didn't even think about it until the fight was done. He was the only person I'm sure I hit and killed in my time in the Green Machine. I'm not going to lie and say I wake up sweating and screaming every night, because I don't. But sometimes I'm just sitting having a drink or watching TV and I suddenly think about him. I can justify it to myself by saying he might have hit one of my friends, but I'm pretty sure I'll never forget him. Difficult that it may be, I don't think too many people in that situation would find fault in what you did. I mean, you were being fired at, you had an opportunity, and you stopped them from firing at you and your fellow soldiers, so, you know. Okay, so this is definitely going to make me out to be an asshole, but it happened and it's not a story I share with anyone. I was in Iraq for 7 months doing convoy security. We would drive all over the country, delivering supplies and personnel wherever we were ordered. It wasn't uncommon for all the kids of smaller villages to run along the roadside asking for muffins, Gatorades, and any other thing they could. At first, we would regularly throw snacks at them. It was cool seeing their smiling faces after they caught a chocolate muffin or a fruit punch Gatorade. We'd feel like Santa Claus, winning the hearts and minds of the younger generations, ensuring they would never turn to terrorism, winning the war one terror, one muffin at a time. But, of course, things changed. Another unit had an accident, and a couple kids got run over or hurt, basically trying to catch snacks being thrown to them. So our new standard of procedure was to not give out anything whatsoever in order to keep the kids from grouping around our vehicles as we'd roll through their towns. This didn't stop them from gathering, and it almost made them more desperate in their attempts to get anything from us, even asking for water, which they would actually reject when we were throwing snacks at them. So we're rolling through this city at a painfully slow speed. Reports of IEDs being found nearby recently, coupled with all the civilians who lined the roads, made us extra careful not to drive over anything or anyone that would compromise the safety objective of our missions. As I'm scanning the road and people ahead of me, I spot this adorable little Iraqi girl, halfway hiding behind her father's leg as she stares at us with her big green eyes. She must have been around 4 or 5. I knew we weren't supposed to give them anything anymore, but my heart melted for her. So I handed my gunner a muffin and asked him to toss it to that little girl, and he did. Their father got this huge smile as he gave us a thank you wave, and the little girl, excited that she got a muffin, ran up to the road to show another group of kids her snack when this boy, who had to have been at least 12, just shoved the shit out of this little girl and snatched her muffin away. My whole truck was pissed, little terrorist shoving the little girl not even half his size. I was livid, as it was a very violent shove, and the little girl exploded into tears as she sat there in the dirt, muffinless. As we continued to roll toward the group of kids, I handed my gunner my piss bottle, a bottle of Gatorade that I would piss into while driving because we didn't stop for piss breaks while on a mission, and told him to toss it at the same kid. It couldn't have been more perfect. As we got closer to the group, he turned to the trucks with his mouth full of muffin and started motioning for us to throw him something, so we obliged. He greedily ran away from the rest of the group of kids that were trying to wrestle the bottle from him. Being bigger than all of them wasn't much of a struggle, so as he's jogging away, we see him open the bottle, then take a huge swig from the bottle before spitting it out and throwing the bottle to the floor. As we drove by him, he was still doubled over, spitting and dry heaving, so we flipped him off.